For over 50 years, the Zodiac Killer has eluded capture, leaving a trail of terror and unanswered questions. But what if the clues weren't just in the ciphers, but in the shadows cast by figures like Anton LaVey and Michael Aquino, all operating within the same eerie San Francisco landscape? Tonight, we pull back the curtain on a convergence of darkness that might just rewrite history. San Francisco is a city that wears two faces. In the daylight, it's a postcard. Cable cars rattling up Powell Street, the Golden Gate Bridge stretching like a red steel spine over the bay, and tourists debating who makes the best sourdough. But when the fog rolls in, everything shifts. The colors drain, the air tightens, and the old Victorian houses suddenly look like they're watching you. Locals will tell you the city has moods. The older locals will tell you the city has secrets. And in the 1960s and early 70s, three shadows moved through that fog. Three men whose legacies still haunt the Bay Area: the Zodiac Killer, a phantom with a hunger for terror; Anton LaVey, the Black Pope of the Church of Satan; and Michael Aquino, a military intelligence officer who also happened to be one of the most controversial occult figures of the century. All three of them lived, worked, or made headlines within the same decade, inside the same strange city, while the country itself was unraveling. Coincidence? Maybe. But in a place like San Francisco, a place where counterculture, secret societies, MK Ultra research, cults, and serial killers collided, that's either one hell of a coincidence or something dark is hanging over the city. Tonight's story isn't about proving a connection. It's about understanding how these men existed inside the same psychological and cultural storm, a storm that still leaves investigators uneasy. To start, you have to understand the biggest showman in the bunch, Anton Sandor LaVey. In 1966, he announced the founding of the Church of Satan, and he did it with theatrical flair. Bald head shaved, shiny black cape, ritual chamber lit with candles, and a personality big enough to fill the newspapers for years. LaVey wasn't a devil worshiper in the way people imagine. He didn't summon demons. He didn't claim to talk to Satan. What he did do was create a philosophy of indulgence, self-worship, atheism, carnality, and ritualist theater. And he did it in the most controversial building in San Francisco, the Black House on California Street. A brooding Victorian painted jet black filled with taxidermy, mirrors, skulls, and a custom-built ritual chamber where celebrities, artists, journalists, and curious voyeurs gathered to watch his midnight masses. In the late 60s, the Black House became one of the hottest and weirdest underground attractions in the city. Jane Mansfield visited. Sammy Davis Jr. flirted with the philosophy. LaVey loved the spotlight, and the spotlight loved him back. But beneath the theatrics, LaVey had something else: connections, writers, musicians, counterculture figures, occultists, and, strangely, more than a few military people drifted into his orbit. One of them was Michael Aquino. If LaVey was the showman, Aquino was the scholar. A sharp-featured man with a precise manner, a deep baritone voice, and a resume you wouldn't expect from someone attending satanic rituals: lieutenant colonel, U.S. Army, psychological operations, military intelligence. He worked at the Presidio base in San Francisco, a sprawling military complex not far from the Golden Gate Bridge, and in his free time, he was an enthusiastic participant in LaVey's Church of Satan. But by 1975, the partnership shattered. Aquino walked away from LaVey, accusing him of corruption, ego inflation, and turning the Church of Satan into a sideshow attraction. Aquino wanted something real, something deeper, something that wasn't built on shock value and magazine cameras. So he founded the Temple of Set. And here's where things get strange, even by occult standards. Aquino didn't just break away philosophically. He claimed that during a ritual working, he received a direct communication from an ancient entity calling itself Set, the same Set from Egyptian mythology, the god of storms, chaos, and the desert night. Aquino said the message wasn't symbolic or poetic. It was a verbal dictation, a transmission of a text he named the Book of Coming Forth by Night. He described Set as an intelligence older than humanity, a being outside conventional morality, a force of self-deification and individual power, something fully aware, fully autonomous, and absolutely real. Not a metaphor, not a psychological archetype, a literal entity. Critics say he was embellishing or dramatizing the experience. Supporters insist he tapped into something ancient. Skeptics argue he may have been influenced by his psychological training and the atmosphere of 1970s occult revival. But either way, Aquino didn't flinch. He maintained, until his death, that Set was a conscious, external intelligence that hand-selected him to restore what it called the oldest initiatory tradition in the world. And that's what separates Aquino from LaVey. LaVey used theatrics to debunk the supernatural. Aquino used ritual to communicate with it. One man said nothing is supernatural. The other said something very old spoke to me in the dark, and that difference would define the Temple of Set forever. The Temple of Set was far more esoteric, philosophical, and structured than the Church of Satan. It was also far smaller, far more secretive, and far more academic. Aquino became a lightning rod for controversy, not because of what he was proven to have done, but because of what people believed he was capable of as a military intelligence officer immersed in the occult. Now keep this in mind. While LaVey was on television performing rituals and posing with lions, and while Aquino was analyzing psychological warfare techniques and writing metaphysical texts, someone else was crafting letters that blended grandiosity, threat, symbolism, and performance into pure terror. The Zodiac Killer. From 1968 to 1974, the Zodiac murdered young couples in Vallejo, Napa, and San Francisco, then sent cryptic letters to newspapers. He didn't just kill, he created a persona, a brand, a symbol, a crosshair circle that became one of the most iconic and chilling emblems in American crime. And here's the part conspiracy theorists obsess over. The Zodiac operated right in the same time period that LaVey's Church of Satan was becoming a media sensation. And during the same years, Aquino was active at the Presidio. Zodiac's first confirmed murders were in December 1968. LaVey founded the Church of Satan in 1966 and hit mainstream attention by 1969. Aquino was stationed at the Presidio in the late 60s and early 70s, deep in intelligence and psychological operations. Three men, same decade, same geography, all rooted in symbolism, fear, psychology, and theatrics, just in very different ways. Does that prove anything? Not by itself, but it sets a mood, a context. And that context is where theories start growing. Let's talk about symbolism. The Zodiac's letters are full of it, references to astrology, ancient signs, coded messages, and philosophical rants. Some independent researchers have claimed the Zodiac's crosshair symbol resembles old alchemical sigils or esoteric glyphs. Most criminologists dismiss that. It's more likely a rifle scope crosshair, symbolizing control and domination. But the Zodiac's language? That's where eyebrows go up. Phrases like slaves in paradise and his fascination with the afterlife feel eerily adjacent to occult metaphysics, including some ideas Aquino later wrote about. Not the same, not copied, just adjacent. Another point of speculation comes from the Presidio. During Aquino's time there, several unexplained murders and disappearances occurred around the base, none officially connected to Zodiac. But because the base is close to Zodiac's San Francisco attacks, people connect dots. Authorities have stated repeatedly that Aquino had clear alibis during all Zodiac activity, so this isn't about him being Zodiac, it's about the cultural crosswinds, the same dark psychological storm that hit the Bay Area, shaping multiple legends at once. The late 60s and early 70s created a perfect breeding ground for eccentricity, violence, ritualism, paranoia, and counterculture extremes. You had the Manson family's reign of terror in Southern California, widespread anti-war protests, drug experimentation, occult revival movements, counterculture explosions, the Church of Satan becoming a media phenomenon, and a serial killer writing coded manifestos to newspapers. This wasn't just a time in American history, it was an unraveling, a collective psychological break. And the Zodiac Killer, he wasn't just murdering people, he was performing. He understood fear, attention, and spectacle just as well as LaVey. He understood psychological manipulation just as well as Aquino, and he understood the power of symbols better than both of them. Some criminologists today argue that Zodiac's persona was influenced more by pop culture, movies, and pulp magazines than anything occult, but others note that his writing style, dramatic, ritualistic, coded, feels born from a city steeped in counterculture, mysticism, and intellectual darkness. San Francisco in that era wasn't normal. It was electric and chaotic. MKUltra wasn't just happening at Stanford. It was pulsing through the entire Bay Area like an invisible electrical current. San Francisco was one of the program's most active playgrounds. The CIA ran covert experiments out of safe houses in the city, most notoriously the one in Telegraph Hill, where unwitting civilians were dosed with high-potency LSD while agents watched from behind two-way mirrors. It was called Operation Midnight Climax, which sounds like a bad spy movie, but was chillingly real. The CIA hired prostitutes to lure men to the safe house, slip acid into their drinks, and observe how their minds unraveled. Everything was recorded, everything was cataloged, no consent, no oversight, no accountability. Across the Bay, Stanford researchers, many unknowingly funded through MK Ultra shell fronts, were studying sensory deprivation, hypnosis, behavior modification, and the psychological breaking points of the human mind. San Francisco in the late 60s wasn't just a cultural revolution. It was an open laboratory where intelligence agencies blurred the lines between science, manipulation, and control. When you realize Zodiac, LaVey, Aquino, and MK Ultra were all operating in the same psychological ecosystem, the city starts to feel less like a setting and more like a cauldron. The Haight-Ashbury scene, the rise of cults, the military presence at the Presidio, the birth of alternative religions, the mass protests, and the shadow of the Vietnam War all collided into a swirling psychological cauldron. The Zodiac thrived in that cauldron. LaVey thrived in that cauldron. Aquino thrived in that cauldron. So were they connected? No evidence says yes, but were they shaped by the same storm? Absolutely. Think about this. LaVey staged rituals to shock society. Aquino wrote about mind war and the power of belief. Zodiac wrote letters to manipulate the public into fear. Different intentions. Different paths. Same psychological tools. The real story may not be that these men intersected. It may be that San Francisco itself, its culture, its chaos, its spiritual experimentation, produced a cluster of individuals who were all tapping into the same energy. LaVey fed on shock. Aquino fed on symbolism and intellectual mysticism. Zodiac fed on terror, all within a 20-mile radius. When you see the map, it's unsettling. LaVey's Black House in the Richmond district, Aquino at the Presidio military base, Zodiac mailing letters from various San Francisco post offices, and murders occurring just across the bay, not proof, but proximity. As for direct connections, there are no verified meetings, no shared philosophy documents, no membership lists connecting Zodiac to any occult group, no eyewitnesses placing Zodiac at the Black House or at Presidio gatherings. What we are left with is an environment, a dark psychological landscape where these men existed at the same time, each carving out their own legacy in the fog-soaked anatomy of a city already on the brink. And that leads to the real question. Are we connecting these figures because the connections exist, or because the era was so drenched in darkness that everything feels connected? Sometimes the truth isn't in the evidence. It's in the atmosphere, the coincidences, the way certain stories seem to hum at the same frequency. The Zodiac remains unknown. LaVey became a celebrity philosopher. Aquino became one of the most controversial military figures of his generation. And San Francisco, it still wears both faces, the bright postcard and the fog-shrouded underworld. Maybe the real link between Zodiac, LaVey, and Aquino isn't collaboration, but convergence. A killer who used terror like theater, a showman who used ritual like advertising, a military occultist who used symbolism like a weapon, all moving through the same city, all leaving footprints on the same decade, all becoming myths in their own way. In the end, San Francisco's darkest period may not have produced a conspiracy. It may have produced something stranger, a tapestry of fear, ritual, and symbolism that feels interconnected, even when it isn't. And sometimes mystery itself becomes the link. In San Francisco, mystery never dies.